Welcome to Super Squad D. I'm Joseph Craven, and we've got a lot to discuss because Legion Season 1 just finished up. I'm not going to waste much time. But if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe down there. A lot of stuff going on, not to mention we give away gift cards and comic books and figures and collectibles all the time, so don't miss any of that. And that's actually why Super Squad D, the channel, exists. It's not just to review shows or something like that. It's so we could be more generous to you, and hopefully in the meantime encourage you to be generous as well. Speaking of which, we had a gift card giveaway on last week's Legion review, and it's time to announce the winner! That is Promethea79. Congratulations to you. We'll get in touch with you on how we could send you that gift card. Stay tuned though, there's going to be another gift card giveaway with details at the end of this video. Well, Legion Season 1 has come to a close. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. And let me clarify, I've loved this show. I really have. It's just always a little bit interesting when the season finale episode is one of the weaker episodes of the season. And I'm not saying it was necessarily a bad episode in any sort of way. I'm just saying that comparatively speaking, compared to how the rest of the season had gone stylistically and dramatically, all that sort of thing, this one was just a little bit weak. Some of the high points that happened, well, the episode starts off with a quick montage of what Hamish Linklater has been up to. That's the actor's name, and I just think it's just such a great name. Hamish Linklater. He wants to finish what he started, and so he's going to war. And then he sees David, and he meets in control David, and he underestimates David, and it leads to this hilarious moment in which David just throws all of the Division 3 soldiers against a tree, and Hamish Linklater says, "Oh, which leads me to another question real quick. What happened to all those soldiers? Did they just hang out on that tree for the rest of the episode? Like, we never saw anything else about them." David and Sid have a conversation out in the woods about David's motivation for his actions right now. So we get to see a little bit of David's selflessness. It's not the attitude that he had when he was powerful, but the Shadow King was in control. And he stormed through Division 3, just putting people in walls and floors everywhere. Again, I don't know what Fox's obsession with that is. It's a weird way to kill people. In this conversation, though, David says that the most dangerous thing about schizophrenia is when you believe that you don't have it. To which Sid again reinforces, you don't have it. Interesting plot point, and we'll get to that more of that in a minute. We also see more of Oliver, just up and walking around. He's been frozen for 2 decades. Shouldn't he have a little bit more trouble moving? I feel like you don't just recover from that instantly, but Oliver's cool with it. Eventually, David turns into the interrogator, trying to interrogate Hamish Linklater. And in the process, the halo, it starts to glow red. And in this show, red glow, red lighting, all of that is a very clear indicator that the Shadow King is afoot. Then in the interrogation, David tries to Good Will Hunting him by saying, "You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid." That, of course, is when Clark drops the great line that we saw in the preview last week. "I know I don't have to be afraid, but I am. Why shouldn't I be? Look at you. You're all gods. And sooner or later, you'll realize you don't have to listen to us." David replies with, "Isn't that the history of the world? People of different nations, different languages, learning to live together?" Interesting comparison there in this constant power struggle between David and the Shadow King, and then of course between Dr. Bird's patients and Division 3. And this is really, really unique because we've actually seen David come face to face with someone who was a threat to him at the very beginning of the show, and he treats him completely differently. We see this change in David, we see this growth in David, we see this maturity in David, really more than anything else. He's more comfortable with his powers, and therefore he's more comfortable with his mutant side, but also more comfortable with his humanity. But at this point in the show, we start to see when Sid and the Shadow King, or Shadow Lenny, are starting to communicate with each other, because as it turns out, when Sid and David connected on the astral plane, and when I say connected, I mean connected in the biblical sense. The Shadow King was able to kind of invade Sid's mind a little bit, and so they get together in the astral plane or in Sid's mind, whatever it is, and they have a weak metaphor contest. Sid says something about her mom going through chemotherapy and tumors being put in bags and burned. Lenny responds by asking if Sid knows how to make soup, and that if you make soup, it's hard to unmake soup. Hold on, I think I need another drink, honestly. Alright, so anyway, so the weak metaphor contest doesn't really go anywhere, but it kind of sets the stage for something we'll talk more about in a minute. And that is the Shadow King telling Sid that the Shadow King can't just be destroyed, so therefore there's got to be somewhere for the king to go. Quick off-topic thing, because at that point a commercial break happens, and that weird iPhone commercial where it's like, say it with stickers, it comes on, and I always just wonder, because like 90% of those stickers aren't saying anything. Like, what's the guy trying to communicate if he's standing there with a Pink Panther on his face? That he's really into saxophone music? Anyway, Oliver comes back. He says, "Boom goes the dynamite," which shows that the character of Oliver is really big into viral YouTube videos from 2005. Also, a really funny moment here where Sid asks how this machine works. So, quite literally, Dude Carey goes and explains exactly how the machine works. It's expository dialogue. It's the weakest form of storytelling, and once again points to this being one of the weakest Legion episodes, honestly, in my opinion at least. If you think differently, explain to me why. I'd love to hear it. Comment. But then we get a great Pink Floyd reference. Obviously, Syd Barrett was a huge influence on, well, that's the character of Sid is named after Syd Barrett from Pink Floyd. Also, I don't know if you noticed it, someone pointed it out to me, but David is wearing a triangle shirt at this point in the episode, and at the end of the episode he's actually wearing a shirt that has very clearly a triangular prism just on it. Great Pink Floyd references if you think about the cover of Dark Side of the Moon. And in a show that prides itself on being very cool and stylistic, this is where we have our most stylistic moments in the episode. David's flashback to his entire life and all the scenes that we have seen in the show where the Shadow King is represented either by the Yellow-Eyed Devil, by Lenny, by the world's most angriest boy in the world, Angry Boy World. But at this moment, all of those representations are being destroyed, are being removed from David's life. David gets to have this conversation with Shadow Lenny where David asks, you know, if you've always been there, what will happen to me when you're gone? What will things be like when you're gone? Also a really cool moment where the Shadow King appears and would normally be terrifying to David. David just raises a hand and freezes him, shows David's psychic power, really intense. Of course, that's kind of reversed in just a little bit when Lenny King says, "I'm not going anywhere," and you see hands start to strangle David. But this is even cooler here because once again that connection's really emphasized. David and Shadow King Lenny have always been together. So when we see hands strangling David, it's not David getting strangled, it's actually David doing it to himself as the camera pans out. That was a brilliant touch. And Sid intervenes, queuing up the one action sequence of the show. Sid and David switch up, or Sid and Shadow King switch up. Shadow King then takes over Female Carey. Female Carey kicks Dude Carey. Patonomy comes in. This is a quick moment to point out, Patonomy is absolutely useless when he's not living in people's memories, right? Like, he hasn't done a single thing in this show that was useful. Did he at least drive the car when they went places? No, that was the other guy. What was Patonomy good for outside of memory work? Patonomy comes in, he has a Tommy gun, he misses everything but electronics. Not really sure why he thought that was a good strategy, you know, trying to shoot a really powerful psychic being who now has martial arts abilities. And then, of course, the amazing confrontation where David comes floating into the room, which was awesome. They charge each other, there's the blast, and poor Oliver is left to deal with the ramifications. And now I'm devastated because I want to know more about Oliver. I just want to know who he is. But instead, he's now possessed by the Shadow King, and he drives off in his car in another really brilliant touch, subtly singing, "If I Ruled the World." Every day would be the first day of spring. Anyway, that's an old show tune from a show called Pickwick. Hamish Linklater and David kind of make amends a little bit. I'm very curious what's going to happen to the character of Clark in the future, since they are apparently supposed to work together now. Because Clark has encountered and Clark has seen the Shadow King. And then as the credits roll, we get Children of the Revolution by T-Rex playing. You might know T-Rex. They are most known for Bang a Gong. Get it on, bang a gong. So we had 2 cliffhanger endings. One with Oliver and his vision, his representation of Lenny. It's really cool how the look of Lenny changes depending on who's seeing it. If it's druggy David, it's a druggy friend. If it's psychotic David, it's a psychotic friend. If it's healthy David, we see gross, dangerous Lenny. Same with when Sid would see her. Now that it's Oliver, we see straight up 60s Lenny. Then we have the second cliffhanger, which is David getting trapped in the ball. It seems like the 2 cliffhangers were prepared for if they got renewed for a second season and if they didn't. If they didn't get renewed for a second season, it would just kind of end with Oliver driving off in the distance. And if they, since they did get removed, it ends instead with David being captured and us going, well, who's capturing him now? So let's talk about the Shadow King and that first ending a little bit more. Shadow King obviously exists as a parasite. They emphasize that term a lot in the show, which I think is an interesting thing because the comics describe Shadow King as being a being of pure psychic evil energy. The show chooses to really hit the word parasite a lot, really hinting at the necessity of the parasite host. Symbiotic relationship, which is what the Shadow King is in the comics too, but the show emphasizes that for a reason. It leads up to this big awesome scene where there's a lot of body swapping and you're not really sure where the Shadow King is going to end up. And that was really good writing. That was one of the better scenes in this episode because it kind of builds it up for you to assume that maybe Shadow King is going to inhabit Sid's body and Sid's going to sacrifice herself to save David. Or maybe Shadow King's going to go into Clark's body because he's there now and we're kind of pushing towards that. Then the action sequence actually happens and you wonder, well, I mean, it could go anywhere. Is he going to take over Melanie Bird? Is he going to take over Dude Carey now that he's in female Carey? I don't think he wants to take over Patanomy. So a nice twist that as soon as Oliver remembers Melody's name, everything's thrown off by him being possessed by the Shadow King. But this is what gets me. Is it just me, or did the Shadow Lenny seem a little too willing to discuss this whole parasite thing with Sid? It seemed odd that the whole soup metaphor was made, and that she stressed that she would have to find somewhere to go in order to save David. You know, I think that's what the soup metaphor meant. Like, you know, you make soup, and then but once you make it, you have to take it, you have to put it in Tupperware, and maybe people are the Tupperware. Anyway, my point here is that it seems like Shadow King was really willing to give Sid the idea for body swapping. And my theory is this. Shadow Lenny was starting to see that she was fighting a losing battle. I mean, the better part of, what, 3 decades had been spent trying to take over David and control David's amazing psychic ability. Shadow King really, really, really wanted David's body because of his powers. There's the whole conversation a couple episodes back when they're talking about gods and how with David's powers, that's godlike ability. So why would Shadow King be so willing to confess to Sid that he might be willing to leave David's body unless Carrie's machine was actually going to work? My theory here is that maybe David wasn't actually as in trouble as he seemed. Maybe their plan to destroy the Shadow King actually was going to destroy the Shadow King, and Shadow King figured that out. So Sid was tricked into thinking that David was going to die from this whole situation. So therefore, Sid panicked and did what she did. I don't think Sid saved David. I think Sid saved the Shadow King. Regardless of all that, at this point, Shadow King's gone and David is totally mentally healthy, right? No? Maybe? So everything that we've seen from David's past in this season was the Shadow King's doing. All the bad stuff, all of his acting out, all of his destruction, it was all caused by the Shadow King, not by voices, not by schizophrenia. So if the Shadow King's the reason there, what do they do with Legion's mental illness, the character itself? It's an integral part of the comic book character, so surely they can't abandon that, right? But anytime that David and the Shadow King are separated, David seems to be healthy, in control, and confident. As a side note, I think they've done a really cool job of portraying mental illness. I think they've hit on some real truths. They had an episode a couple episodes back where they talked about bipolar and manic depressant personality disorders, and David said that it's not the low parts that are dangerous parts, it's the high parts. which is actually, you know, pretty true for people that struggle with things like that. That's also why I think the line in which David's saying the most dangerous part of having schizophrenia is believing that you don't have it in this episode. That's got to be an integral part in where they go with the character of David in terms of Legion's mental health. Of course, in the comics, Legion had a bunch of different personalities, and the personalities all had different powers. Since Legion was created, though, we have a much better understanding of mental health, especially how schizophrenia and dissociative personality disorders work. So it would kind of make sense the show would stray away from some of the misconceptions, but it's such an integral part of the character that we have to follow that somewhere. I'd be very curious to see where it goes from here, and I really hope that they haven't just made David healthy because the Shadow King's gone. Finally, with Oliver and the Shadow King driving off into the sunset, into the mountains, Oliver asks Shadow Lenny, where do you want to look? And if the Shadow King has been looking for revenge on Charles Xavier all this time, Season 2 might have a lot more Charles Xavier references in it. I will say this though, in Season 2, we might not have Charles Xavier specifically being what it is that Shadow Lenny and Oliver are searching for, because when Shadow Lenny was interrogating David's sister in a previous episode, he was pretty adamant about saying, where did he put it, where did he put it, and asking the sister if she remembered the day that David arrived at the house. So there is something, it seems, that Shadow King is looking for and using David for, which might be why Shadow King was so willing to leave David's host body. Just a separate train of thought. I'm not sure I feel confident about either one. But we don't have brain dead David at the end of this, like we did in the comics at the end of the Muir Island incident. So an interesting direction. Not really sure what's going to go on there. Not really sure what that ball thing was. If you guys have any insider theories, comment. Now, I'm not going to talk about Season 2 very much in this episode because we're going to be doing that on our channel later on in a completely separate video. But I want to hear your comments. Let me know what you thought of this episode. Did you like it? Did you feel the endings were satisfying endings? Does it make you want to see Season 2 really badly? Were you a little disappointed in it? Who do you think it is that's captured David? If you think I'm an idiot, I guess you could say that in the comments also. I just would appreciate it if you were a little bit kinder than that. Once again, subscribe, comment on this video. You'll be entered to win another gift card in Stock Trades. What we do on this channel also is a live show. It's a live talk show where we give stuff away and we talk about hot topics. It's every Tuesday night, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. If you comment on this video, you'll be entered to win a gift card that we'll give away on the live show this next Tuesday. So comment for the gift card, and then go out in the rest of the week and do something nice for somebody just because you can. I'm Joseph Craven. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next Tuesday. April 4th? April 4th? Really? It's my dad's birthday. I should call him. This is Super Squad D, where the D stands for Daddy Issues.
Yippee!